the Chase Thomas Podcast, for people who have nothing but time to kill.
All right, we're back here on the Chase Thomas Podcast, where I'm joined by old friend GoVols247's own Ryan Callahan. Ryan, good afternoon, sir. How are you?
Doing well. How about you, Chase?
Pretty good, Ryan Callahan. We are days removed from the Nico Iamaleava saga over the weekend, and I want to talk about other things. I want to talk about other things with Tennessee football, and one of the things I'm most curious about, because it's been a while since Tennessee kind of had I would say a rush of guys coming in, like Tyreek King from Catholic, and you saw a couple of big names. Like, okay, Tennessee's quietly adding some big pieces here. They could be done. Like if Tristen Keys had gone the way Tennessee had hoped, then like you're done with the wide receiver board here in the early part of the spring. But that not obviously go the way Tennessee had hoped to this point, because everything can change up until signing day there with the 5-star out of Mississippi. But my first question to you, Ryan, when you're looking at the 26 part of this, who is your favorite? Because I thought this would be fun in terms of the refresher for Vol fans who may not remember everybody who's in the boat right now for 2026. Who is your favorite non-Faison Brandon player currently in the 2026 class for Tennessee?
Ooh, that's a good one. Yeah, I'm a pretty big Tyreek King fan. I think that's a great system fit. Just an explosive guy. You don't have many of those in state. They've had some good playmakers in state before, but not many that are quite like him. So I think that's a really good fit for Tennessee, and definitely one of the more exciting guys in this class. So I like him quite a bit. That's probably the first one that comes to mind. It's a pretty interesting group though so far. I think there's some real upside. CJ Edwards is one that's probably flown under the radar for a lot of people, but is a pretty talented guy. If they end up getting 2 edge rushers in this class, he's going to be the one that probably flies under the radar the most. But his upside is probably as exciting as anyone in that group. And then probably the bigger name, although rating wise he's not at the top of the list right now. But Tyson Bacon, his stock has really gone up quite a bit since he committed back in the fall, and he's to the point that Tennessee's going to have to weather a handful of official visits to other schools. Ohio State just offered recently. So he's a guy whose stock has risen quite a bit since he committed. So I would say he's high on that list too. But yeah, Tyreek King for me personally is probably the one that stands out, just because I think wide receivers, that position, Tennessee's not, they've gotten some guys. We'll see this year what they've got in Mike Matthews and Braylon Staley. But if there's a position that you'd say they maybe haven't gotten the roster quite where they want just yet, and maybe this may totally change by the end of the year, because we'll see what they've got in Travis Smith and Rodarius Jackson. I think those guys, there's reason to be excited about them. But if they can get just the right slot, the right dynamic playmaker guy that can take a 10-yard pass and go to the house with it again, maybe not another Jalen Hyatt type, but someone with at least some of those types of traits, I think that's a big deal for this offense. So I think Tyreek King is pretty exciting if you're a Tennessee fan.
How is he different? Because Travis Smith, it's obvious like how he's different than Mike and Braylon and some of the other names. Like his catch radius is huge. He's a huge kid. He's more, I feel like, filled out as a true freshman. It just feels like he's in a good spot to contribute, I think, right away. Part of that's numbers, of course, for Tennessee with 7 scholarship guys, but I also just think he's going to push Brazel on that opposite side. And he was also a big name player at Westlake, a powerhouse back in Georgia. And that's one of the things I look at with Mike and Travis specifically. Number 1 player in the state of Georgia in back-to-back years at wide receiver coming out of high school. And I think there's a lot of room for growth, and I wouldn't be surprised if they both had really good careers at Tennessee. They just need Braylon Staley to stay healthy. It's a big thing. Like they need Braylon. Like there's just not the depth behind him. Like Boo Carter's going to get some snaps there, but like Joakim Dodson's not a early enrollee. So maybe Rodarius, who had the catch of the day in the orange and white game, maybe he can play some slot. Maybe that's kind of how you get him on the field earlier.
I wonder if Mike Matthews just goes to the slot if something happens there. That's
interesting.
One possibility. I could see that maybe where you just throw Travis Smith outside with Brazel and Matthews goes in the slot. You've got some options there, but yeah they maybe need someone from the portal there. That's going to be interesting to see this spring what they do at wide receiver, because I think you need another body there. It's just a matter of what do you get. And yeah, maybe Joakim Dodson has to be ready to contribute in a pinch like that in the slot. But yeah, they not a ton of depth there overall. So I think they've got to bring in somebody from the portal. I couldn't imagine going into a season with 7 scholarship receivers. I know it's tough to keep ideal depth at any position these days, but I just think you've got to have somebody else at that position.
I agree. Speaking of receiver, we talked about him at the top here because it feels like forever ago that Tristen Keys just out of nowhere. It felt very random that Tristen Keys committed to LSU, but you also get it. It's like LSU. I mean, it's hard to, outside of Ohio State, there's not anyone with better wide receiver track record in the last 10 to 15 years, putting guys in the NFL and stars in the NFL than LSU. But Tennessee obviously was in that deep and still, I think, in it deep. And you have the Faison connection there that felt like gave Tennessee a better shot at potentially landing Keys. Do you think that's over, or do you think that's still one to watch this summer and this fall with OBs and where Tristen Keys is at?
Yeah, it's not over. He's going to take his official visits. It sounds like Tennessee will still get one, so there's reason to think they still have a shot. Now that one, the timing of that commitment was surprising because he already had all these official visits on the books. Didn't seem to be anywhere close to a decision after initially back in the fall acting like he might make a winter, early spring type decision. Didn't follow through on that. It kind of backed off that, and then next thing you know, he's committed. But LSU was the team that was always kind of hovering in the background. Even at the time, Tennessee and Alabama, I think, were the two that a lot of people felt were in the best shape at that point. But you had Texas A&M hanging around. You had LSU hanging around. And LSU was the one I always kind of had my eye on. LSU's gotten apparently an influx of some NIL money this offseason. Losing has a way of motivating a lot of programs, especially in the SEC. So I think they've gotten pretty aggressive with some of those guys. And you got to remember, Tristen Keys is in Hattiesburg. He's down there close to New Orleans, not too far from LSU country. So that is almost a home state guy for them. So to have a 5-star receiver like that in the area, I'm not surprised they made a big push for him and were able to land him. But that's one that, I don't think he's shutting that down anytime soon. And still getting that official visit, you've got a shot if you're Tennessee. But I wouldn't, if I'm coming up with a mock class for Tennessee today, I'm probably not penciling in Tristen Keys right now. It feels like they've got some real work to do there to be able to flip him. So we'll see what comes out of the official visits this summer. But that seems like one that might be at least tough to land just because there's so much competition for him. Not even if he flipped, it wouldn't necessarily be to Tennessee. It could be to somewhere else. So that's going to be one that's the number one receiver in the country in some people's eyes. Like guys like that are just hard to get these days, and they end up being big NIL battles a lot of times. So I just don't know if that's one I would count on Tennessee winning, but they're still right in the thick of it and have a real shot.
Kind of like they're behind Florida, where I'm glad Heupel's have moved on from the state of Florida. He was good. He was trying early on. Who was the cornerback who they were in deep with?
I had a conversation about him recently, and now I blanked on the name then too, and now I can't think of it.
He ended up at Florida State, right?
Yeah.
What was his name? But he was a 4-star corner, and they were in it deep with, and then it was like he still ended up staying home after all that, and it's like I can't not remember his name off the top of my head.
It's gonna bother me.
But like it's one of those. They look up Florida State, and I mean the Florida kids, and then it's Mississippi. I think is the other one.
Kai Bates.
Who?
Kai Bates.
Kai Bates. Yes. Yeah. And that just feels like the last time Tennessee went in deep with a Florida kid, and it was like, it's probably not going to work. It traditionally, it's never really been a great strategy to try and pull kids out of the state of Florida to get to Rocky Top. I think Mississippi is underrated number 2 hardest to pull kids from the state of Mississippi. It seems like that's always one that's hard because I think there's a real in-state pool for a lot of those guys, and it's harder because it's a ways, and it's just I don't know. I think Tennessee's base is state of Tennessee, obviously, North Carolina, Georgia, and then you pick your spots in South Carolina and Alabama. That's to me how I feel like. And then obviously if there's a national guy you have a connection with, whatever, you go do that, especially quarterbacks. But I don't know. That's kind of where I think they've settled in, which I think is smart. But Mississippi just feels like it's always one where it's like if you're getting excited, like let's see, wait until they commit for a Mississippi kid.
You'd have to go back to like Paris Harrelson, to find Tennessee having gotten a big time player out of Mississippi. And it's just a different age now. Ole Miss they don't have the biggest stack of resources when it comes to NIL, but when there's a big time guy in state, they can prioritize him to the point they've got a real shot. And the big thing is when those guys leave the state, it's often for an LSU or an Alabama or an Auburn, and those are all closer than Tennessee in most cases. So that's it. Yeah, it's a tricky state. There's some others that have I've always said Louisiana has as strong of an in-state poll as anywhere. Ohio is way up there. Ohio State has they don't lose many that they want up there. So it's different with NIL now. You see more of those guys that are willing to leave to that kind of to the highest bidder or to the best overall package they find. But yeah, those are some of the states that for sure have that strong in-state poll, and Mississippi is that's a good reference there. Kind of a strong in-state attachment that a lot of guys don't get away from there sometimes.
The next commitment is which position group are you guessing, Ryan Callahan?
Yeah, that's what's so tough right now is we're in that kind of calm before the storm where somebody probably will commit before June. You don't know for sure, but it's been quiet for a little while. But so many guys right now are all saying they're going to wait till official visits in June and then make their decision this summer.
But that never happens. Someone does it.
Yeah, but who is it? I often look in state. That's often where you have the best chance of getting someone. So I don't know who it would be at this point, but because they all have official visits on the books. So I don't know. I mean, this would just be a total shot in the dark. I'll say cornerback. Maybe they get that. That's a position where they need to get somebody in this class. They're going to need at least 3, maybe 4 in this class, I think. So maybe they get that cornerback class started at some position. If not there, I could maybe see edge rusher. Let's change my guy. I will go with edge rusher. They'll get their second guy in this class. I could see that maybe happening before June. So I'll go with that as my official guess, but maybe cornerback would be an outside possibility too. But yeah, it's kind of a shot in the dark because there's just not a whole lot that appears to be imminent at this point. Like you said, usually something happens in April or May. There's been some post-spring game activity in the last couple of years. This year, I don't know if there's anything on the horizon like that. So we'll just kind of have to wait and see. And the other part of this is I think the portal is sort of at the forefront for Tennessee right now. So does that sort of distract them from making a strong push for anyone that might convince someone to get across the finish line this early? That might at least help things hold off until May. So we'll see how much of that they do. But coaches go back on the road here soon. The spring evaluation period technically underway. Tennessee will go out next week, I think, to start their visits. So once those visits happen, that's no longer an evaluation period. You're actually meeting in person with coaches. So those visits can always prompt activity. So you never know. But yeah, it's hard to really pinpoint any one player that might be close.
I like it. Well, the person in state, when we're talking about like just in-state options, the one that like I think I've got circled, and I think a lot of ball fans have circled, is Craig Tutt at Oakland, because there have been, let me check my notes here, 0 blue chip safety signees in the Josh Heupel era, which is weird because it's every other area they've added blue chippers. But last year, it was the one just gut punch was the Lagonza Howard, Shady Hayward situation at the end, because you're like, man, I think he's just a really good player, and out of the state of Georgia, it's like that would have been a great pool, and it just obviously falls through for whatever reason. But you still need a blue, like you still need, like, I just give me one. And Craig Tutt is in state, and you don't have many of those blue chip guys in state. Do you think Tennessee right now is in a good spot with Tutt?
I think they are. That's been an interesting recruitment where I'm not sure his current ranking maybe reflects the way his stock is seen nationally. He's a bit of a smaller guy. He's a little bit under 6 feet, I would say. Just a good football player though. I'm a pretty big Craig Tutt fan. I think that's the type of guy that just a good player, and on both sides of the ball at Oakland, pretty good running back part-time also, where he got some carries last year when they had DeJuan Morris and multiple guys in that backfield. He would still get in there some on offense and make some plays. So I think that's always a good sign when you're just a guy that the team wants to get the ball in your hands on Friday nights, even though you're a defensive back. And so I think Craig Tutt's a good fit for Tennessee. I think I could definitely see him ending up in Tennessee's class. That's kind of looks like maybe a Tennessee Ole Miss battle right now. I think Ole Miss has made him a pretty big priority, so we'll see how that one goes. But I think Tennessee's in a pretty good spot there, and the fact they were the first team to lock in an official visit with him suggests they're in pretty good shape going into the summer. But that's one where I think he's still been feeling out his stock, where his value is going into the summer. And so, Michigan's in the picture. We'll see where else he ends up going. But Tennessee I think they've been right at the top of his list all along. And it was weird. He went 5 or 6 months without visiting Tennessee before he finally made it back for a spring practice. But getting him back on campus, I think, was a good step. And Tennessee seems to be in as good a shape as they could be probably right now.
I like it. In terms of, this is the one that I think is probably the most surprising to me, and something that I think a lot of fans are probably raising an eyebrow at, is Carson Sneed taking a bunch of visits this summer. His brother entering the portal here, Dayton, is a walk-on receiver. I mean, it's just weird because I think he grew up a Tennessee fan. It just felt like one of those obvious just fits for Tennessee, and he committed a while ago. And then you bring in my favorite name in this class, Moose Ludwig, which is just fantastic in terms of names here. But you have Jack Van Dorselaer, Moose Ludwig on opposite ends of the tight end spectrum here for Tennessee when they're running 12 personnel. Who says no? But I am kind of curious. Where do things stand with Carson? And then is the Moose Ludwig stuff kind of real? Like, hey, if Carson's going to take visits, like we're going to push for Moose here.
Yeah, I think Tennessee's pretty heavily involved there with his actual name is Matt, but yeah, like you said, everybody knows him as Moose.
Sorry, I'm not doing Matt. He's Moose. Like once I saw Moose as the nickname, like he's Moose.
So if you're looking for him in the 24/7 Sports database, he's under Matt. But Tennessee definitely a real player for Ludwig. There was a crystal ball pick not too long ago for Michigan, so there's some other teams that think they're in pretty good shape with him. So it's a battle. He's taking an official visit to Georgia. So serious competition for him. He's a good player, even being from Montana, not a state. Tennessee recruits a whole lot, but yeah, I think Tennessee has done a good job with him, and they've stayed in the picture despite having a tight end commitment, which is sometimes not easy to do. You know, they've had Carson Sneed committed for a long time, and he visited last summer. Ludwig did for the first time and put out a top 4 back in, I think, January that had Tennessee in it. So at the time, you weren't sure anything was going to come of it because Carson Sneed was in the class and it didn't look like they were likely to sign 2 tight ends. But now as this thing's played out, it's a good thing Tennessee kept recruiting Moose Ludwig the way they did. And yeah, there's a real chance they could have to address that position. We'll see what happens with Carson Sneed. That's a really interesting one to me. I don't know exactly what is going to come of his brother being in the transfer portal, but he's a solid player. He's shown up in the spring game the last couple of years. And interestingly, he entered the portal the day, or announced he was entering the portal the day before the spring game, when he's kind of made a name for himself the most the last 2 years. But not shocked that he wants to get on the field somewhere, but or he and Carson definitely tied to the hip. And as you said, Carson grew up liking Tennessee, and he's an in-state kid. I don't think Tennessee's looking to part ways with him, but it's one of those situations they've got to protect themselves. So I could definitely see him going elsewhere at this point. And then North Carolina and all these other schools have kept recruiting him, and he's taking visits. He's got like 6 official visits scheduled. So he's going to make Tennessee sweat it out. And in the meantime, they've got to make sure they're covered. And I think it could be a situation where Tennessee just got to feel things out a little more with Carson Sneed just to see where things are before they really go all in on Moose Ludwig. But I think they're happy they've got that backup plan there. And definitely, would not rule out at all that Tennessee ends up kind of having to make a trade there at some point.
Final one here for you. Braden Roos. Is he a realistic Georgia pull here? Because it feels like this is Christian Gass all over again. I think he's a Lanier kid, right? If I remember correctly.
He's at Cal.
Cal. They're both Longhorns. I get them backward. Yeah, they're Lanier Longhorns and the Cal Longhorns. Yeah, and same color scheme too, actually. They're both orange. But when you look at him, 4-star linebacker there, do you foresee that being the same kind of Georgia-Tennessee battle it was for Christian Gass a year ago?
Yeah, that's very possible. His other official visits, I think, are Alabama and Michigan right now. We'll see. We'll see where that one ends up going. I think Tennessee's in a pretty good spot there, though, and has been for a while. He's been on campus 5 times since October. They've done a great job with him. Got him on campus even in December for one of the practices leading up to the college football playoff back in January for a junior day, and then was recently back in town for a visit that allowed him to attend the spring game and see the walkthrough the day before as well. So they've done a really nice job there. Georgia has tightened things up there a little bit, but yeah, I think you're not wrong to kind of peg that one as a Christian Gass type battle. We'll see where else he ends up visiting and what those visits might do. I never rule out anything with anybody these days going into official visits because things can change on a dime with just one visit. And I've seen too many guys where you think, man, I didn't think that school was running higher than 3rd, and now he's committed coming off a visit there. So you just never know what can change. But yeah, if I had to guess, I think that one does probably come down to Tennessee and Georgia in the end. And Tennessee's done a really nice job there. They're set up to get the final official visit. So I think they've got a real shot at Braden Rouse, and that's one they've done a nice job with throughout the process. Kind of targeted him, I think, back in August, and he's pretty consistently made the trip to Knoxville since then.
Final thing, and I'll let you go, Ryan. And it's just a percentage. Over, under 50% Savion Hyder is a Tennessee ball.
Man, I would say under right now, just based on the odds of the other teams in that one winning that battle. But I think Tennessee has a realistic shot. I'm maybe as fascinated by that one as any battle that Tennessee is in, just because we've not seen them really go all in on the running back position. They've got, Peyton Lewis was a nice win for them a couple years ago, but to go get a really highly ranked, coveted guy like that, obviously they've not invested that kind of NIL resources into a running back to this point. So will they do that to win a battle that obviously it's a big boy battle? Ohio State, Georgia, Michigan. It's Michigan's a team you've heard a lot in connection with Savion Hyder in recent months. So I would not discount Michigan in that one, even though some people might just assume it's Georgia and Ohio State you're worried about. I don't think that's the case with necessarily with Savion Hyder. But yeah, Tennessee, that's another one. They get the final official visit, and sometimes that matters, sometimes it doesn't. But in these NIL discussions and things like that, sometimes that can be helpful, where you at least know where everyone else is, and then that last visit gives you a chance to kind of see if you've got a real chance of winning that battle. So I think Tennessee's got a shot there, and that's again just one where I'm interested in seeing kind of how they approach the running back position, because it's been kind of a strategic thing, I think, not to go all in from that. In terms of that position compared to, say, edge rusher, defensive line, offensive line, quarterback. They've kind of focused more on the positions the NFL prioritizes more. Now will they go all in on a running back? I think it's a really interesting possibility, and they put themselves in position to have a shot. So got him on campus again this spring. I think they're right in the thick of that one. So I'll say under 50, but that doesn't mean they can't win it. That's a realistic possibility, I think.
Ryan Callahan, what can the good folks check out from you and the team over at GoVols247 this week?
Well, I guess we'll find something to write about. I don't know. There's nothing going on, right? Yeah.
Patrick Brown's like, I just want to write about the depth chart. I want to write about actual ball, and you're making me cover this other stuff. Like, the man is over here trying to just write about ball, and you're not letting him. Someone
asked about a spring game recap the other day, and we're like, we've had so much other stuff to write.
Yeah.
We almost had to skip over the spring game. It's been crazy, but
also, we're not calling it a spring game. They've ruined it. Like they've all ruined it. It's not a spring game. Whatever that was.
Glorified practice. I mean, it had 8 possessions in it. I mean, that's not a full game, obviously, but yeah, it was. There were some things to see from that, but yeah, we've got lots of full coverage of the transfer portal, and obviously fires up Wednesday morning, and we'll have full coverage of that, and monitoring every quarterback that probably enters the portal at this point. We'll be keeping close tabs on that and where Tennessee goes to address that position, obviously, in the aftermath of Nico's departure, and then other positions too. Tennessee's got some other needs, so we'll see what else they end up doing in the portal. And as I said, coaches going on the road soon. Baseball's in full swing. Lots to check out, and definitely not a boring time right now on GoVols247.com.
Ryan Callahan, always a pleasure, my friend, and we'll check back in again soon.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you having me.
Nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas Podcast. Hell yeah.